life. And we still keep screwing it up. And He still keeps letting us enjoy it. I mean, that's just that alone ought to teach you a little bit about hospitality. But the concept of hospitality is when you invite someone into your space that is a stranger and they're treated like family. That's so the words that make up the word for hospitality is two words to get together, put together, mean the love of stranger. That's what it means. And then biblically and historically, what it meant was to welcome the stranger in like a member of the family. So remember Israel, when they were to welcome in the stranger, they were supposed to treat them like one of their own. That was the language that God gave to Moses when He instructed them how to care for the stranger. And then there were quite a few guidelines on how to do that. There were the cleaning laws. Remember, there's like you don't clean to the edge of the field. You always leave some left for the stranger to come in and eat. And so in our context, if you're not a farmer, that would translate in you have margin in your budget to feed other people outside of your family, or in your pantry to have extra food for when someone stops over. That would be the equivalent of that concept. Is that you have a margin in your time, in your finances, in your house, and in your food for the stranger to be treated like a family member. The problem is most people actually budget to the end. They budget to the edge of the field, not they don't leave the margin on the field. And I'd encourage you, as you think about being hospitable people, ask how do we create margin financially, physically, spatially, with both time in our homes, and even just like with food, table type space for the stranger. So that's what it meant. There was a lot of other cultural concepts that went into hospitality. You might remember, you've heard this phrase, some entertain angels unaware. That's a hospitality statement. There was a cultural kind of understanding that when someone would come in front of your door, you were supposed to treat them as a possible deity. In their culture, they actually believed that the gods would show up in physical form. And so if a god was passing in front of your house, you were supposed to welcome them in, because you might be entertaining a messenger, a divine messenger. Well, that got translated to the Christian community to say, please know that God is divinely working in people. And if you remember the words of Jesus, whatever you do the least you've done unto me. So in a sense, every stranger that comes across your door is a potential for you to entertain an angel, a messenger from Jesus, or Jesus himself. So there was this real kind of understanding that if you saw someone come across the path of your door, you're supposed to invite them in. This is crazy, to blow your mind. You were not supposed to get to know their name or anything about them until you brought them in, washed their feet, fed them, made sure they were rested, and had every other need met. Then you could get to know them. That was the order in the hospitality rules of the day. So you don't get to ask them their name or anything about them until you've taken care of their needs. We do just the opposite. Not until I know everything about you are you going to get anything from me, right? We flip it. And you guys go like, you might go, I don't believe you, Jeff. You guys have seen, if you've seen the movie The Lone Survivor, and you guys seen that? That it got worked out in that movie. That's a true story about a soldier who was with, there were 5 of them. 4 got killed. It was a reconnaissance mission of a SEAL team. He's going to die. Probably not going to make it unless he gets help. He's hiding out in a river. Do you remember that? And this older man, this looks like his grandson, kind of Bedouin-looking fella, comes up to the river, and the immediate thought of the American soldier, because he's on foreign land, is that he's going to get killed. Because he's figuring the guy's going to turn him in. But what he doesn't know is the law of hospitality in the Middle East, which that should ring a bell for us now. That's where the Bible found its origins, right? The law of hospitality in the Middle East was that if you stumble upon somebody else, then you actually have to protect them and care for them at the cost of your life. So what happens in the movie, the old man takes him, the soldier's scared to death, thinks he's dead, he doesn't know their law. Hospitality requires that the man now takes him into his home. So if you remember the movie, the son and the father are bringing the soldier in. As soon as they cross the path of the gate of the city, now the entire city has to do the same. This is a real story. It really happened. They get into the city, the Taliban's coming after them, they blow up that place, kill all these people to try and kill that soldier, and all those people give their life so the soldier can live, and he lives to tell the story. At the end of the movie, they tell you the hospitality law. So then you're like, oh my goodness. Now when I saw that, I thought, man, every pastor should have to watch this movie when they get like, laid hands on to be an elder of the church. Because they should go, that's coming from the scriptures ultimately. That's what God called his people to do. Why? Because it's a picture of Jesus, who laid down his life so we could be brought into the household of God at the cost of his own life. And it's amazing. What if the church leaders, because why do you do it? You're supposed to set an example for the flock, 1 Peter 5. Why? So the whole church would do it. Because God's intent is the entire church would live like that in the world we're in, and we would welcome in the stranger, even at the cost of ourselves. Now I know in our culture, we gotta use wisdom in this. Like, I don't invite a pedophile into my son's bedroom to spend the night. Okay? I don't do that. But I will tell you, I've had a missional community with sex offenders in it, and I've just given them very strict rules on what they can and cannot do. And I've said, how would I love my brother if he was a sex offender? He would get to be in my house, but he would be in my house with me with him. And we would pay attention to what he's doing. But I wouldn't say, you don't get into community because you sinned. What he needs more than anything is someone to help him get healed of his brokenness. And so we had to walk through hospitality, how we set it up for protection. Because the other side of hospitality is not only good for the stranger, but you do also set up your house in a way that makes it work. Like they even had to have rails, certain size on the roofs, so people couldn't fall off and get hurt. I mean, if you read the Bible, you start realizing there was so much hospitality guidelines in the Old Testament. You don't see it because we have not been taught that hospitality is welcoming the stranger and treating them like a family member. Our idea of hospitality is either you pay a hotel to do it for you, or it's fellowship with Christians that you know and trust really well. But the biblical idea of hospitality is welcoming the stranger into your household in a way that treats them like family. And that's just what it means. Can you imagine? I'll just give you a suggestion. If you were to just teach your churches, if the leaders would lead by example and teach their churches to follow in being hospitable, I would bet the mission of the church would blow up in the best possible way. I think that people would not be able to explain away what we're doing, other than they'd have to have an answer that leads to Jesus Christ. Because people don't do this. When's the last time people in the church said, I have to buy a house to make sure there's enough room for a stranger to live with us when they need a place to stay? We don't do that. We think primarily about our family when we buy a house. But what about, I want to make sure I get a vehicle that has an extra seat more than just my kids. So one more person could get a ride if they needed it. I mean, I can keep going, right? How much of our budget is being built this way? So let me encourage you, if we could learn how to exercise the skill of hospitality, the art of hospitality, I think it would open up the door for evangelism like maybe nothing else. I'm convinced of that. And the reason why is because most people that we've got to lead to Christ, it came through hospitality. I mean, I've already tell you every story of every person I've led to Christ and baptized, hospitality is at the key of their conversion at some point. So, yes. Yeah. How do you deal with the fear? Pay attention. The reason why most suburban contexts were built was to get away from people. So, I mean, and that's just the reality of what you're living. I mean, I live in a suburban context now too, and it's hard to combat the very reason for why it was made the way it was. Now, new suburbia is putting front porches back on the houses because they realize that it's really bad for people to not be in a relationship. But I would say the fear is a practiced thing. We've learned how to be alone, so we don't know how to be with. So part of it is we got to help our people get over the fear by teaching them that God didn't ever think you were supposed to be alone. And it's actually killing you. It's bad for your family, it's bad for your marriage, it's bad for your person to live in isolation. So I think part of it is you got to teach that you were not meant to live this way. I'm doing a series right now called Making Space for What Matters Most, and we're just looking at the Proverbs, because a lot of the people that I'm inheriting have all said, we're way too busy for mission, we're way too busy for people, we're way too busy for hospitality, we're too busy to have people in our life. And I said, then clearly you're broken. Because the scriptures would never affirm that you're too busy for the things you need. Right? So when you can't have time for the things you need, that's called foolishness. So I said, maybe we should go to Proverbs and we'll look at wisdom and how it applies to all these things. So I've been teaching through when is work a God? Because some people work too much. When is isolation out of fear? When do we need friendship? And so I'm teaching all these basic things out of Proverbs. And I'm watching people just go, you can see it's like water over their soul. Because they know they need it, but they're afraid to take a step forward. And so then we got to talk honestly about why we're afraid. Why are we afraid to have good friends? Because we're afraid of being rejected. Well, let's talk about that. Like, ultimately, we have one who will never reject us. So if we're settled in Jesus and the Father's affection for us, then I can lose people that are broken. It'll still hurt, but it won't be devastated because I've got Jesus. So I've got to do a lot of teaching. Well, why don't we want that? Why do we live with the idea that being in community is bad? When we all know intuitively it's not. But there's fears for why we are there. We might have been hurt, rejected, abused. I mean, there's all these things that happen. And so then we learn how to live a life running from something that's good because it was perverted or broken at some point in our life. So I think we've got to unearth why that's there. And it might be different for everybody. There are some common themes. Some of it is actually the worldview that we bought into in North America that's really broken, actually. And it starts with the individual being the center of the world instead of God, which then, because God is communal, we build it around individualism and isolation. And so we think individual pursuit of happiness is the highest good instead of communal affection and care is. And so we just have built it around the wrong God, is what we've done. So we've got a lot of dismantling in the worldview we live in. That's just going to take a lot of work. But don't give up on it. Don't give in to the culture because the culture's broken. The kingdom culture is supposed to redeem the broken ones. So let the kingdom define how we live, not the world. Yes?
Yeah, could you just put this one too back in the context of the circle you drew where people are doing mission and they go out, come back, how to go, and you know what I mean? Because I'm just imagining hospitality now run through I tend to think with an individualistic.
Yes, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, because Israel didn't do hospitality by itself, it did it as a nation. And so this isn't meant to be, you figure it out on your own. That's why Mission Community is so beautiful. It's like, how do we together care for the stranger? Because we all have different resources we can share, gifts we can give, time we can extend. And sometimes we don't have as much time because, like, I've got 3 kids and they're all in sports and I need somebody to help a little bit. So hospitality might look like me needing someone to help me so I can be hospitable to someone else by them watching my kids. Or, one of my kids staying at someone else's house, they give their bedroom for 2 weeks or whatever it may be. So it's, communal in nature. Please don't try to do hospitality by yourself. And what I'll see a lot of times, missional teams are led by one couple, and they're doing all the hospitality for everybody. And that's not helpful. That will destroy you. So we do it together, just like that village did for that soldier. The whole village chipped in and did it. So this is where the church has got beautiful, beautiful refuge, because we have all the resources needed. There's a reason why they could describe the church as there was no needy person among them. It wasn't that there weren't needy people around them. There was no needy person among them. So once you came in to the household of faith, once you got invited in as a stranger, your needs were taken care of. So can you imagine if the world said, you want to know how you get all your needs taken care of? You go to the church. That's how it used to be. I don't know if that's the case anymore. So in fact, some people think the reason why you go to a church is because they need you to help fund them. My neighbor across the street, I remember a really sad story. Her kids were attracted to an event for children, for upper elementary kids, that their friends at school invited them to. It was at a pretty big church in our town in Tacoma. Great church, by the way. But they went to the event, came home, and the next thing you know, mom and dad are getting emails and solicitation and calls to come to more stuff. And she comes to me and she says, I know what you're doing. You're using my kids to give me at your church because you want your church to get bigger because you feel better if you have more numbers. You can spend more money if you get more money from us. She read right through it. Our kids have become a marketing scheme. She's like, this is why I hate the church. And now I defended the church because I know, and I said, I don't think that's really what they're intending. I think they're wanting you to hear the same good news that your kids did, but I can see why you felt that way. It made me think, what if instead of us saying, we need your kids here so that we can get you here, we said, when we send your kids home, is there anything we can do at all for you? We just want to serve you. No need for you ever to be a part of our church. Just want to serve you.